Viva EFF, viva! Viva EFF, viva! Long live the undying spirit of Winnie Mandela, long live! Long live the fighting spirit of Winnie Mandela, long live! Malibongwe! Igama lamakosikazi! Roar, young lions, roar! Roar, young lions, roar! Long live the undying spirit of Peter Mokaba, long live! Commissars, those who have claimed that Marxism and Leninism are outdated ideas are now confronted with the highest prophecies of Marx and Lenin. That is the rise of imperialism as the highest form of capitalism. The Western and capitalist world is beginning to eat itself alive, and the anchor that will destroy Western society is the very nation that has been the most aggressive in its capitalism, the USA. As capitalism collapses, there is a growing sense that we are returning to the age of colonialism and domination through military strength rather than cooperation and consensus. The stage we are in is what Lenin refers to as the final stage of capitalism, destiny of crisis and collapse. The USA is currently in pursuit of territorial divisions of the world in order to control global markets and provide greater influence of global corporations over the natural resources of society. It is a nation led by paranoid and possibly mentally ill individual who has no regard for international law, for the logic of economy, and for the science of politics. As a result, we are all faced with a crisis because for too long, capitalism has been dominating economic order of the world. As socialists, it is our duty in this moment to see the silver lining, and that is, as capitalism collapses, we are given an opportunity to usher in a new world order based on equality, prosperity for all, and the return of the means of production into the hands of the people. We must not view the current international moment as one of despair, but within it, we must mobilize resistance, solidarity, and a new era of humanity. This new era is one where the USA no longer exists as the so-called leader of the free world. It is a new era where humanity must speak boldly against the presence of US military bases in foreign countries. It is a new era wherein we must divorce the global economy from dependency on the dollar. It is an era where we technological advancement and military capacity must be built by all nations so that we can defend ourselves against the threat of US imperialism. Comrades, inasmuch as Donald Trump is a manifestation of tyranny and fascism, he is not a major departure from the core of what represents the character of the USA. The USA has always been imperialistic. The USA has always been a destabilizing force in the world. What has changed is that the leader of the USA today pursue the destructive policies of the USA openly without pretending to be seeking peace. Donald Trump is the naked face of what the USA has always been: violent, imperialist, and evil. It was the president of the USA, Truman, who dropped the atomic bomb on the innocent people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, killing more than 200,000 people. It was Johnson of the USA who invaded Vietnam and under his authority undermined the human rights. It was George Bush who led the disinformation campaign that Iraq and Afghanistan had weapons of mass destruction in order to justify causing instability in those nations in order to steal their oil. Fellow fighters, it was Barack Obama who orchestrated the death of brother leader Muammar Gaddafi. Until today, Libya has not recovered and our African brothers are sold in a slave trade in that region. I say this to highlight to you that Donald Trump is simply continuing a tradition of violence as foreign policy by the USA. When Trump invaded Venezuela and kidnaps Nicolas Maduro, he is continuing a tradition of violence as foreign policy. When Trump bombs Nigeria, bombs Iran, and finds genocides of people of Palestine by Israel, he is continuing U.S. policy of violence as a means to entrench U.S. imperialism. I've said this before, that any expectation that after Donald Trump's term comes to an end, that our relationship with the USA will stabilize is misplaced. Donald Trump is an extension of a history of destructive U.S. foreign policy, and as long as South Africa stands with Palestine, then we will never know peace. It is therefore important to be aware of this as we head to local government elections here in South Africa, and be aware of the possibility of U.S. interference in our elections, be it through funding our ideological opponents, attempting to fracture our democracy using tribal lines and traditional leaders, or actively pursuing the imprisonment of leaders of the left in our country. This election is not one that will be purely domestic, especially considering the propaganda machinery deployed against South Africa of a non-existent white genocide. We must begin to prepare ourselves for the worst, as the USA is determined to punish South Africa for standing up against apartheid Israel. We must never surrender, even in the face of imperialism or death. We must never be shaken, and we must never compromise our sovereignty to please the United States of America. Commissars and fighters, the conditions facing our people in South Africa have become more dire. That starvation has become a prominent cause for death. Central to the crisis confronting our nation is collapsing municipalities which are unable to conduct basic service delivery and have become increasingly dependent on tendering and consultancy firms. Municipalities in South Africa are run by officials, and elected public representatives account to these officials more than they do to the people who elected them. City managers, CFOs, and COOs are the government of the day, and these individuals control politicians by colluding with them in crippling our municipalities. And these public representatives agree to be used by the city managers, CFOs, and CEOs to collapse and steal from the poor of the poorest. Our communities are suffering rolling electricity and water outages, while large companies bribe their way out of paying for the use of these resources. The largest consumer of water and electricity are not the people in the suburbs or the township, but the companies. Yet it is our people who bear the brunt of rising prices of their household. We need to, in this plenum, develop a strategy of taking back our municipalities from the hands of officials and placing them back under the control of the people through councillors who are not corrupt. This plenum must come out with an idea of what is an ideal municipality and how can it sustain itself and our communities. If we do not do this analysis, then we will win broken municipalities without any ideas how to revive them. And we will lose elections because our people will blame us for a broken system. Comrades, over and above that, the budget, after budget, it is the EFF which stands alone to call out how equitable share model of national treasury works, which allocates least amounts of money to municipalities, which is illogical and outdated. The logic of national treasury, which presumes that municipalities can sustain themselves through revenue collection and presumes that municipalities are resilient across the board, is a recipe for failure. We need to review the equitable share model, which subject the coal phase of service delivery, which is municipalities, to smaller allocation than provincial and national government. The presumption that rural and township municipalities ought to sustain themselves through revenue collection alone in the same way metropolitan areas do is tragic, especially considering that the residents in rural and township municipalities are largely unemployed. We must never get tired of making this point, because at the center of the collapse of our municipality is national treasury, is illogical fiscal planning around our state infrastructure. Comrades, as much as we may be pleased with the victories of eliminating the expiry of data, there is a bigger war we need to wage against the price for electricity. It has become a norm that every quarter NERSA announces a hike in electricity prices, condemning our people to a life of misery and hardship. We must, at the center of our elections campaign, put the crisis of the cost of electricity. Enough is enough. Our people cannot go on like this without any form of action. Comrades, it is a lie that we must dispel now that load shedding has ended in South Africa. It has simply been given another name called load reduction. It is as bad as load shedding. We cannot, as leaders of society and as the media, participate in a state-sponsored lie that South Africa has recovered from electricity crisis. To do so will be to form part of misinformation and the election strategy of the former liberation movement, which will be based on the lie that they fixed a problem which they created in the first place. A week does not pass without a blackout of electricity in one community or another in South Africa. The people of Soweto live a life of darkness while we accept a lie that things have been turned around. We must champion these struggles, and this plenum must emerge with a concrete strategies on how we will rescue communities from darkness. Comrades, the challenges of hunger are destroying our communities. It pains my heart when I hear that children in the Eastern Cape have died of hunger. We must, as branches, identify families who are in need, as it is not an African that children can die of hunger while they exist in a community. This must be an adopted program of each and every branch and sub-region of the EFF, and those families must be helped without exposing them or humiliating them for social media. I want to take this opportunity to once again send my deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their children in that tragic accident of scholar transport in the Vaal. My heart bleeds for those families who had to recover the bodies of their children after such horrific accident. We send our condolences to all the victims of floods in all provinces that are affected by the floods. We must outlaw informal scholar transport and push for the state-owned scholar transport in all municipalities. A buggy and a van is not a scholar transport, and those who drive children on our roads to school must be vetted and registered with the Department of Basic Education to avoid irresponsible people being custodians of the lives of our children. Commissars and fighters, the hunger of our people is unbearable. It is due to a struggling economy and joblessness. All industries in our country are on a downward spiral, and we are rapidly deindustrializing as a nation. Our failure to industrialize and build infrastructure capacity is why we are easily blackmailed by nations such as the USA, because there is no internal capacity to survive and trade amongst ourselves in the continent. Every day we are told of retrenchment in massive industries such as steel and automotive industry, and this GNU has no strategy or plan to reverse the decline. We will never defeat poverty if we do not build industries, because industries are jobs. The election manifesto of the EFF must speak to strategists to localize development and industry, and this plenum, through commissions, must provide such guidance. Commissars and fighters, the people of South Africa are held hostage and are at the mercy of criminals. Week after week, we witness mass shooting in the city of Cape Town, which is led by the DA, and there is no solution to that crisis. The former mayor of Cape Town, Helen Zille, who leads the DA today, wants to be the mayor of Johannesburg, leaving behind the dead bodies in Cape Town, where the DA has failed the poorest of the poor. The first question Helen Zille must be asked is, what is her party doing about crime in the city of Cape Town, that now she thinks she is worthy of leading the city of Johannesburg? As the EFF, we need to stand up against criminals and take them toe for toe in defense of our communities. The EFF continues to lead the fight against crime in Parliament by making progressive proposals to strengthen law enforcement and investigate the root cause of this crisis. This fight must be taken up by our councillors in communities. We must establish EFF-led community protection programs and apprehend criminals. You are not a revolutionary if you know the house of a drug dealer or a rapist in your community, yet you sit and do nothing about it. The time to accept that criminals can stay amongst us must come to an end. Stand up, South Africa, stand up, fighters, and chase away drug dealers, and chase away women abusers, and chase away gangsters in your communities. It is on that note that I wish to commend the EFF Youth Command, which through its Sizofunda Ngenkane campaign also launched an initiative to get those who are selling admission in institutions of higher learning arrested. The Youth Command must never retreat or be intimidated by criminals who take advantage of the desperation of our people who are trying to get an education. Let me make it very clear, even if this includes EFF Youth Command members who are selling spaces, you must go open cases against them and get them arrested, because we do not exist with criminals and will not tolerate criminals amongst ourselves. No one in the Youth Command must take advantage of the poor, of the poorest. You must always be combat ready to help the poor of the poorest without expecting anything in return, including without expecting them to vote for you. You are helping them genuinely because you are helping an African child. The Youth Command will play an important role in the coming local government elections and must begin to build solid and verifiable election structures that will mobilize young people in all spheres of society. We need mass registration of young people all over South Africa, led by the Youth Command. The Youth Command must be at the forefront to mobilize the youth of South Africa to participate in the local government elections. We are nothing without the youth of South Africa. If the youth of South Africa turn out on an election day, we have already won this election, and we will win this election with the Youth Command leading the charge. Commissars and fighters, as an organization, we find ourselves at the moment of where we either thrive or perish. It's now or never. If we decline in this election, we must pack our bags and go home. We must go to a battlefield ready to die to emerge victorious in these elections. We are going to do everything in our power to ensure that the EFF retain its constituency and break new grounds in areas where it never existed. We have built sub-regional structures in an effort to take our organization back to the people, and our primary focus should be directed and should be direct interaction with each and every South African voter in order to convince them of the ideas of the EFF. We must, commissars and fighters, ensure that sub-regional structures meet regularly, and a standing agenda item ought to be service delivery programs and elections. We must ensure that our branches meet regularly, and councillors must convene community meetings to engage society and fix the problems confronting them. This is mandatory, and any councillor who fails to convene community meetings and resolve everyday challenges confronting our people will face the harsh consequences of the organization. All sub-regional command teams must embark on verification of all the voting districts, election task forces, and establish strict volunteers in each and every ward and each and every street. The work of elections begin today, and we must know how many soldiers we have for the war to come. There must be zero tolerance for anyone who misleads the organization and provides information to manipulate the leadership into thinking we have volunteers in instances where we do not have. Leadership is disciplined and honest, and dishonesty is tantamount to treason in the revolution. Fellow fighters, this will be a testing period which will demand utmost discipline from all of us. There will be no tolerance for laziness and ill discipline. There will be no tolerance for people who are given tasks and do not fulfill them. Each and every one of you seated here must be able to take individual and collective responsibility for the work of the organization, and this includes fundraising and organizing resources for elections. Commissars and fighters, the time for unity in the organization is now. There is no room for division and factionalism. You must know that if you partake in such, then you are an infiltration which is sent to destroy the EFF. Remove envy of one another. Resist the temptation to undermine others and lead in alone without consulting the collective. Respect your leadership. Know that the EFF is a party that leads and government follows. We don't take government responsibility to be the responsibility replacing those of the party. The party leads, government follows. As long as we've got an organization, there will always be a government. Fellow fighters, we need to ensure that we promote the organization above everything else, and as our constitution guides us, avoid taking personal glory for the work of the collective. As we enter this phase of election, you must avoid using I did Malemaville. I established Malemaville. I did this, I did that. Why didn't you establish Malemaville when you were in primary? Why didn't you establish Malemaville when you were in the youth league? Why did you wait for the EFF to encourage people to occupy the land and take over the land and stay in those pieces of land for you to now claim to be a hero in the area where you come from? Avoid personal glory and always promote organizational collective glory over victories that are won in the organization. As we enter this phase of elections, which will be characterized by a mayoral candidate, let us choose the best amongst us and rally behind our mayoral candidate. Let us know our strength and limitation. The mayoral candidates of the EFF will not automatically be a leader of a sub-region or a province or even the CCT, but will be determined who we send, while ensuring that we do not weaken the organization in other areas of governance and responsibility. Let us discuss here in this platinum the caliber of an EFF mayor, because the EFF supports other organizations to have mayors have come to an end. We will field mayors, and anyone who wants to negotiate with the EFF must know that the EFF wants mayorship. To our MMCs, it may that it does not govern on its own in municipalities, especially here in Gauteng. We must stop any negotiation with the ANC, and where the ANC removes our MMC, all of you as MMCs are going to resign, and that cooperation stop immediately with the ANC. Where the ANC fills a mayor as a candidate, we are going to fill the mayor as a candidate. Where a motion of no confidence is passed against an ANC mayor, we are going to support that motion of no confidence against an ANC mayor, especially here in Gauteng. We will not be voting for the budget of the Gauteng MEC of Finance here in Gauteng. The ANC knows that without the EFF and MK, they will never pass the budget. We will mobilize the MK to support our campaign, not to support the budget of the EFF in Gauteng, because we are supporting them in KZN for motion of no confidence against the EFF.
Brothers and sisters, let's be absolutely clear about what just transpired here. This wasn't a diplomatic disagreement. This wasn't a polite critique wrapped in careful language. This was a full frontal assault on the most powerful empire in human history. And Julius Malema delivered it without flinching, without fear, without asking for permission. Think about the weight of what he just did. The United States has toppled governments for far less than this. They've orchestrated coups, imposed crippling sanctions, and destroyed entire nations for leaders who dared to speak half these truths behind closed doors. Yet here stands Malema on a public platform, calling Trump the naked face of evil, and systematically exposing American imperialism for the world to see. This is the kind of fearlessness we haven't witnessed since Patrice Lumumba stood before the Belgian king, since Thomas Sankara challenged French neocolonialism, since Gaddafi dared to dream of a united, independent Africa, and we all know what happened to those giants. But Malema knows this history. He studied it, and still he speaks. That's not recklessness, comrades. That's revolutionary courage. That's a man who understands that silence in the face of oppression is complicity. And here's why Washington is truly panicking. Malema has just shattered the glass ceiling of fear that keeps African leaders muzzled. For decades, our presidents and prime ministers have whispered these truths in private while smiling for Western cameras in public. They've watched their people suffer under IMF conditions, endured military interventions, seen their resources plundered, all while maintaining diplomatic relations with their oppressors. But when a leader of Malema's stature stands up and speaks this boldly, it creates permission for others. It shows African leaders across the continent that you can confront the empire and survive. You can speak truth to power. You can put African interests above Western approval. Imagine, comrades, if even half of Africa's leaders found this kind of courage. If they rejected the toxic loans, expelled the military bases, nationalized their resources, and told the IMF exactly where to go. If they formed true Pan-African alliances based on mutual liberation rather than continued subservience to former colonizers, where would Africa be? We'd be controlling our own minerals instead of watching them stolen for pennies. We'd be processing our own resources instead of exporting raw materials and importing finished products at inflated prices. We'd be feeding our own people instead of importing food while our fertile soil grows cash crops for European tables. Africa would be what it was always meant to be: powerful, prosperous, and free. Now, what must we expect? First, the backlash. Western media will try to dismiss Malema as a radical, an extremist. They'll dig up every controversy to discredit the messenger because they cannot refute the message. We've seen this playbook before. The conversation has shifted. Malema has moved the window and there's no pushing it back. The revolution won't be televised on CNN, but it's being live-streamed across African social media right now. And Julius Malema just lit the match. The question is, will Africa's leaders rise to this moment? Or will they continue to choose comfort over courage? The people are watching. History is watching. And after today, silence is no longer an option. A mandala.